and this is part 2 of the original RDA. To get started, the top of the original RDA toolkit is shown here. For access to the original RDA toolkit, follow the instructions in the General Information module for RDA toolkit access. If the text Indiana University School of Informatics, Computing and Engineering is not visible in the upper right corner, fill in the account ID and password given in the module in the upper right corner. Under the RDA Toolkit logo on the left side are 3 tabs. The content of RDA is in the first tab, Useful Tools are under the second tab, and access to AACR2 as well as policy statements and best practices are under the third Resources tab. The contents of RDA are organized in expandable sections. The Tools tab contains my own most used tool, the RDA mappings. It connects all of the RDA guidelines to their corresponding mark tags. That may come in handy to you in the future if you go into cataloging. The Workflows tool contains even more direct instructions as collected by various cataloging agencies for particular formats or processes. It can also be useful. The Workflows tool is already mimicked in the new toolkit as application profiles. These will be developed by organizations and other cataloging agencies when the policy statements and best practices and RDA itself are more complete. The Resources tab gives access to the full text of AACR2. We will go over in more detail how you can tell from data in the MARC framework which standard was used in a later module. But if you see a data point that isn't what you'd expect, you can look through AACR2 to see whether it is the result of the previous descriptive practice. This tab is also the place to find the policy statements in their entirety, as well as other best practices. For many of these, you can connect to the corresponding RDA content with the RDA button. It is possible to find the desired guidelines by using the RDA quick search as well. Be aware that takes some practice and a good understanding of the toolkit structure to find what you need, though. The toolkit offers the guidelines that we follow, along with alternatives and options, as well as exceptions to follow in certain circumstances. The optional omission example here includes several buttons for policies and practices, where you can see the LCPCCPS button. Any references to other areas of RDA come with the RDA button to get there directly without having to navigate the table of contents in the RDA tab. There are also examples of the guidelines shown where applicable. There are additional guidelines where needed in the policy statements and best practices as well. This is a good place to note that we expect you to follow the LCPCCPS for the cataloging assignments throughout the semester. That is part of our class policy, which you will hear more about as we go along. It's also important to note, you'll hear quite often that we do not catalog by example. So the examples are given just to sort of give you an idea of what's going on. But always, always, always stick to the guidelines and the policies and the best practices. There are instances where the content of RDA includes standard terminology to use in the data. Here we can see the carrier type, specifically starting with audio, because it's alphabetically at the beginning. It's odd to say, but there are essentially 3 types of description used in library cataloging. First, transcription versus recording. For our purposes, we define transcribe essentially as take what you see. In RDA, a guideline will tell us when to transcribe an element, meaning to include the information that we see as we see it. For example, when we see a misspelling in a title, because we are transcribing it as it stands, the misspelling becomes part of the title in our bibliographic record. We define record essentially as be consistent. In RDA, a guideline will tell us when to record an element, meaning to take the information that we see and put it into a standardized format. For example, when we see the publication date as the Roman numerals MCMXCVIII, instead of transcribing the Roman numerals as they are, we record that using the Arabic numerals 1998. The second type is unstructured, structured, or a form of identifier. Unstructured descriptions are usually those that use transcription. While the data goes in specific marked boxes, it is not moved around or drastically changed. Structured descriptions may contain a combination of transcribed and recorded data in their designated marked boxes, but not in the order presented. For example, a publication statement includes the place of publication, transcribed as seen, the name of the publisher, transcribed as seen, and the date of publication, recorded as seen, by using a standard format. Regardless of the order in which those pieces of data are presented, we arrange them in a designated order. Identifiers may be alphanumeric codes or strings of characters like a Uniform Resource Identifier or URI. These are recorded elements. The third type of description gives us a choice as to how deeply a description goes. A comprehensive description is commonly used for archival collections in a library catalog, telling the story of a collection as a whole without much detail about each item in the collection. More detailed descriptions live in other resources developed by the archive. An analytical description provides detail for each item in a collection and has been used to provide detail for each part of a whole, such as a single essay in a book, keeping each independent and distinct from the others. A hierarchical description is the best of both worlds, providing details about the whole and details about each part separately, connecting the parts to each other and to the whole. The RDA registry contains all of the vocabularies that comprise terminology, elements, and entities in RDA, representing those vocabularies in the resource description framework. The RDA registry is in more common use as we have worked to better facilitate the machine-readable part of cataloging as technology has advanced. As the focus on machine use of libraries and their catalogs gains even greater focus, the RDA registry will be used more and more. The RDA registry takes a lot of getting used to as a human to understand how to navigate it and find the necessary labels to use in our descriptions. On the left is the top of the page for the RDA carrier type values. Given the design of the pages, this is all you see on the screen at first. Scroll down and you will see the list of defined values with more information. We saw similar values in an example of RDA itself for a human-readable physical description in the previous slide. While the values found inside the original RDA content are for humans, the values in the RDA registry are for machines, and this is where we can find the translations between the two. As need arises, the vocabularies in the RDA registry will be amended, deprecated, and modified to reflect new or changed information.